on this teleconference with Bernberg, and was pretty shocked by what Bernberg was saying. Bernberg was complaining that Tedros had refused to engage with the US despite several attempts, and most people who know how the WHO works says that's absolute nonsense. The WHO is full of US and European and, of course, Asian and African officials, all of whom are engaging with Tedros. And there was no he said, the Congolese ambassador said there was no unwillingness on Tedros's part. And then the US ambassador Bernberg said that he was looking for some concerted action to deal with what he called the problems of the WHO. And the ambassadors I've spoken to in Geneva have said that that is interpreted as the US not only withdrawing financial support for the WHO, but also withdrawing political support for Tedros, which means that it would oppose his re-election for a second 5-year term. That doesn't come up for a couple of years because Tedros was elected to head the WHO back in 2017. But it also raises the prospect of a real battle in June for the General Assembly of the WHO, which this year will happen virtually. But what America and Taiwan are trying to do is to cause a political row by insisting that Taiwan gets admitted to the General Assembly. At the moment, because of the One China policy, muscularly promoted by China, Taiwan is only on the technical committees of the WHO, but doesn't sit on the General Assembly because China would boycott the organization if it allowed Taiwan in the General Assembly. So you're going to see quite a clash over the Taiwan issue. And again, the American officials have accused Tedros of being far too sympathetic to China and blocking the Taiwan's full membership of the WHO. In fact, it's not down to Tedros. It's down to the members of the WHO. And if they vote, and obviously China is going to use its diplomatic muscle to stop them, Taiwan would have been a member. So it's really not Tedros's call. But it does raise the specter of this politicization of the WHO into this battle between the US and China, fought at that level, and Tedros and the African interest that he represents narrowly, and the general tenor of the WHO are going to be the collateral damage in that.
That is going to be a tough one to unpick. Just to come down to the level of the beleaguered aviation industry, with zero segue possible after your intervention, Patrick. But I just wanted to ask the difficulties now encountered by two of South Africa's large airline companies. Obviously, South Africa Airways has been in administration for a while. Some kind of new rescue plan or new company even is being sketched out, and also Comair is now struggling, which you've been writing about this week. What is the state of the South African aviation industry at the moment?
Nicholas, Comair, as you know, is the listed privately owned company that holds the British Airways license in South Africa. It's a specialist airline. It does specialist routes in the domestic market and also flies regionally, and it's been a success story. For the past 74 years, Comair has declared profit and paid dividends to its shareholders. But this week, in a sign of the extraordinary times that we're in, unfortunately, they notified the market that they've voluntarily entered into a business rescue process, or as you call it, business administration. That effectively means that the operations of Comair are going to be, restructured or streamlined to ensure that they're viable post COVID-19. The company sees no prospect of getting back into the skies, whether it's domestically or regionally, until about November or towards the end of the year, judging by the rate at which, COVID cases are escalating in the country, and at the level at which we are now, which is 4. Levels 3 and 2 are far off the horizon by their estimates. And going to SAA, there's an interesting sort of battle that's emerged between Pravin Gordhan, the minister who oversees the state-owned enterprises portfolio in South Africa. He's not pleased with the way in which SAA's business rescue practitioners have just handled the entire process. So too the unions, they're also not pleased with how the business rescue practitioners have handled SAA. In fact, he was in Parliament on Wednesday evening to say as much. And there's a possibility of a legal challenge to the business rescue process. As you would know, the practitioners have said that there's no hope of resuscitating SAA because government doesn't have scope to inject the airline with more money. They were given 5.5 billion earlier this year from a budget appropriation. All of that money has disappeared, and they have zero results to show for that. So it's a toxic mix, unfortunately, Nicholas. Interestingly, just before we got together here, SAA released a statement saying that they're still going to operate repatriation flights. They're still going to meet their customer obligations, and May 8 is not their date of death as had been pronounced by the business rescue practitioners. So it's looking quite grim at the moment, for SAA as well as COME, and one would assume it's pretty much the same for the other players in the local market.
One of the opinion pieces that we had on the site a couple of days ago by Sylvain Bosque was, positing this idea that maybe this is exactly what was necessary to shake out the aviation industry in Africa. All those small national airlines which didn't quite make sense and needed to be propped up by national governments will go to the wall, and that's going to be painful and jobs will be lost, and that's no easy thing. But left standing at the end of it could be 7, 8, 9 profitable African airlines on the scale of an Ethiopian airline, with Southern Africa having maybe just 2 or 3 operators rather than what it has today. Do you think that is a possibility, or is that the kind of optimism that happens when you've been shut up in your house with too many Zoom calls all day?
I think it's quite a very optimistic assessment of the situation, Nicholas. But back to the point about SAA, Gordhan said in his presentation to parliamentarians, and it was a virtual meeting that they had on Wednesday evening, he still believes that SAA can be restructured and a strategic equity partner can be brought in, that, whatever emerges from the ashes of SAA can be salvaged into a viable operation that's profitable, that's not dependent on the fiscus, and that's also, profitable and essentially to save jobs. So I don't know what such a process would take, because, with reference to SAA, over the past 10-year period, we've been hearing about strategic equity partners. We've been hearing about, the necessity to wean SAA off the fiscus. That hasn't materialized. Perhaps COVID-19 will provide the impetus to make that a reality. And the situation calls for it, because they're backed into a corner. They can't get out of it. But about Sylvain's point, it's too soon to tell, Nicholas, and it's quite optimistic, I think.
Patrick, what do you make of these optimists who want to see the pandemic as what Arundhati Roy is calling a portal? She points to pandemics in history as moments of intense social, cultural, economic change. Just yesterday, I was speaking to Fred Swaneker of the African Leadership Group, who has a similar kind of mindset on this. He says, Africa needs to, launch into e-commerce, for example, and start seizing the opportunities that perhaps this pandemic will give us in terms of remote employment, using, getting Siemens in Germany and Zara in Spain to hire designers and engineers in Ghana and Nigeria. No need to worry about visas all of a sudden. What do you see in terms of potential opportunities that might be seized?
Well, I agree with all those that are saying that this is a big historical moment. I mean, I think that's undeniable on the political plane, the economic plane, social plane. There's no question about it. And I think particularly for Africa, it's a real moment to seize, despite the appalling public health threat that you mentioned earlier. So I think we're going to see from the conversations I've been involved in, going to see a lot of localization, a lot of national and regional production coming up. I mean, I think that the pictures now have been circulating quite a lot. This film of the production of face masks in a factory in Accra, but I think that it's become a bit of a symbol of, you've got this pandemic, this national global emergency. And Europe and the US are looking like sort of gigantic rabbits caught in the headlights. And so Africa just has to get on with and do its own stuff. And I think that's become a metaphor for a lot of the ideas that are propelling in economic and social initiatives in Africa. And I think it's helped in some way how Africa goes through this. It's helped because of the history of epidemics, of Ebola, and all the other public health woes that afflict Africa, like malaria, cholera, and so on. So I think in many ways the communitarianism of Africa, the way that the social structures in Africa can be mobilized to fight public health emergencies, as we've seen, are really important. So it really helps the country. So I think. In some, you're going to see a shift from individualism and consumerism to the social and productive ideas, and that's not just a sort of philosophical generalization. I think you're really seeing practical examples of that. I mean, as I said, African countries are now producing their own protective equipment to help their health workers, protect their health workers, deal with this. To give you a couple of particular examples, I was talking to a friend in South Africa, and he runs a delivery company, and it's a kind of it's a socially conscious Uber company, I'd say. He's hired a bunch of people on motorcycles to run around the country in South Africa, delivering medical supplies and protective equipment for health workers, and so on. And more mundane stuff, sort of legal documents and government letters and so forth. But the point is, because everyone has been locked down, they've got an essential worker status, and his business has quadrupled over the past month. I mean, he'd been running it before the pandemic, but because he guarantees his workers a monthly wage, they're properly salaried, it's a formal structure, pays his tax and all the rest of it. He's doing very well. He's got good relations with the government, and we were discussing about other initiatives, and one of the things we're looking at is looking at these using digital in terms of distributing essential inputs for agriculture and sort of primary manufacturing operations and so on. So I think there are a lot of ways that Africa is going to can seize these opportunities. Some sound, very, very localized and quite small, but put together, they're going to